Hi, I'm Alannah, and I'm here with Josh, Ethan, and Kai to walk you through how the Universal Design for Learning, which is commonly referred to as UDL, can be effectively used as an inclusive teaching strategy within a classroom setting. Also, how to help you understand how and why it's beneficial for all learners. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we completed the learning of this unit at Monash Peninsula, which is the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're recording today, which for me is the Wurundjeri people. I'd like to extend our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people viewing our presentation today. I'm now going to hand it over to Josh so that he can explain to you all what UDL is.
Yeah, so as Alannah was speaking about, our chosen topic is UDL. And UDL is a framework within education that focuses on designing lessons so that it makes it accessible and equitable for all students to participate in. So if a teacher is able to plan a lesson from scratch and incorporate as many elements as the UDL as they can, it'll allow for them later on to not longer have to make any modifications or retrofits later on. Moving on from that, we have ways in which promoting UDL in a lesson plan can occur. So allowing for accessible and equitable, so ensuring it's all accessible for students regardless of their needs. It is a flexible and framework altogether. Every student has an opportunity to succeed, and it shifts some control of learning to the students, which is our ultimate goal, is to try to create some independence and some self-directed learning through this framework as well. I will talk about the three pillars under the Universal Design for Learning are engagement, representation, action, and expression. And there's a bit of a visual cue for you to have a look at for now, but we will pass on to Alannah. She will set up the classroom context and speak about what our classroom looks like. And then from there, I'll give some specific examples on what the UDL framework looks like in our classroom example.
Wonderful. Thanks, Josh. So we've created an imaginary Year 4 classroom to offer context, but the students within it are based on our real experiences working in schools. The class we're going to be using as an example today has 23 learners, which they're all bringing different strengths, interests, and challenges. It's a culturally diverse group from a low socioeconomic community. And like any classroom, there's a wide mix of abilities and learning needs. Among these students, we have a few who require additional support, including learners with ADHD, a learner who has ASD and also a hearing impairment, a learner with dysgraphia, and one with dyslexia. We also have advanced learners who require extra challenges in the classroom. But by using this imagined context as an example, we'll be able to explore how inclusive strategies, and in particular, Universal Design for Learning, can create opportunities for every student to succeed. So just briefly, which Josh will go into more depth about how the principles apply to each of these students, but in terms of relevance to UDL, our student with ADHD is energetic, curious, and often struggles to sustain attention or regulate behavior in class. So UDL is relevant because it provides flexible options for engagement, including movement breaks, varied learning activities to help maintain their focus. Our student with ASD is thoughtful and capable, but they experience challenges with social interactions, especially communication and hearing in busy classroom environments. So in this case, UDL supports their inclusion by offering multiple means of representation and communication and ensures that they can access content and build social connections. For our learner with dysgraphia, the student demonstrates strong verbal reasoning, but finds handwriting and written output kind of challenging. So UDL allows for alternative ways to demonstrate learning, such as speech-to-text, technology, and visual organizers. And like I said, Josh will go more in depth with this later. But our student with dyslexia is imaginative and engaged in discussion, but they struggle with reading, fluency, and decoding text. So UDL provides multiple means of representation, including audio text and multisensory literacy strategies, ensuring access to curriculum without being limited by reading difficulties. So as you can see, Universal Design for Learning is highly relevant in this context, as it ensures that lessons will be planned with flexibility, and it offers multiple means of engagement, representation, and expression. So this approach, it will not only reduce barriers for the four six highlighted students, but it also benefits the entire class by promoting equity and supporting the diverse cultural backgrounds and accommodating the varied ways that all learners process information and are able to demonstrate their understanding. So now my fellow group members will explain how we can use this to our advantage in more depth, as well as how our context can be more directly linked to examples of UDL in action. So I'll hand back over to Josh now.
Right, so the first principle of the UDL framework is representation. This principle focuses on presenting information in multiple ways to meet the needs of all learners. So, for example, what Alannah talking about before was we had a variety of students in our classroom context. What student one, specifically with dysgraphia, allowing them to access lesson notes digitally or via audio recordings still gives them the chance to succeed in our lesson. Our student with ASD and hearing impairment, so they might benefit from incorporating things like visual aids, captions or graphics, just other ways that they can still access the information, but it doesn't necessarily require them having to hear it, that information. And then stemming on from that, we've got student 5 and 6, which we spoke about as our advanced learners. They can engage in interactive simulations or extended readings. So that might be, for instance, if we're on a topic of plastic waste, we might give them an extended reading or some sort of material as well that might enhance their learning, as well as giving them opportunities to, which I speak about as we move on in the other principles, is opportunities to present their information in different ways as well. But in this instance, it might be that they engage in an interactive website that allows them to look at how plastic pollution spreads throughout the ocean. And that way they can pick up a lot of different information from that. So I'll move on to principle 2 now. And we have engagement. So this focuses on motivating students and sustaining their interests. Now, the importance of this is making sure that the learning itself is relevant to the students and actually hits their needs and focus on their preferences. Otherwise, if you're going to have a class that you're going to engage and teach, you're going to struggle if you don't have something that relates to them. For example, within our school setting, we have student 2 who had the ASD and hearing impairment. So as we mentioned before, we had an IEP for this particular student and they wanted to work on their social skills. So structuring them in group activities can allow them to do that. And it might be with pairing someone they're comfortable with or putting them in the group that they feel comfortable within. Student 3, we have ADHD. So within our lesson, this might look like having structured like stations within our learning environment. So it might be moving from one station that might be taping and the other station might be doing, drawing or whatever it might be, or writing in that sense. And then having those stations rotate more often allows that ADHD student to stay on task rather than just making it a large task that they have to really hone in on. A whole class approach, which is what the UDL framework actually entails, is offering choice as well. So for the engagement side of things, if we've just done a reading on a class novel, allowing all students to have a variety of how they respond and express the way that they understand the novel. So this might be writing a diary, it might be creating a poster, it could be a PowerPoint presentation, whatever it might be. It allows for the students to still engage in that topic and it might be more aligned with their interest. So we'll move on to principle 3 now, which is action and expression. And this allows students to demonstrate what they actually understand and know in a variety of ways. So for example, with student 1 who has dysgraphia, they could use speech to text technology or maybe even type their response. So if we're doing a writing task, just because they've got dysgraphia, we want to give them the opportunities to still succeed within that framework. So by doing that, it sets them up for that success rather than just grading them on their ability to write. Moving on from there, we've got student 4 who is dyslexic, so giving them maybe an oral presentation or creative visual project instead of a written report. And that way they can still demonstrate their understanding and they might feel more comfortable in that setting. So it might give them the chance to actually express and demonstrate that they know what we're talking about and they've understood what we are teaching. It's just a different means of communicating that. And then from there, we've got our student 5 and 6, which I was talking about before with advanced learning, is allowing them to pursue inquiry projects. So this can look like asking them open-ended challenges or questions so that challenge their higher order of thinking so they can respond to this question in a variety of ways. There's no right answer. And that way that student can enhance their learning and understanding on a particular topic. And other than that, that's the UDL framework. So we'll move on to the next slide. And the framework itself caters for all students. It allows for students to for teachers to simply just placing students in classrooms, it allows us to make that learning experience a lot more meaningful for those students. And if a teacher is successfully able to embed the three principles, it allows the lesson to transpire, which is equal, it's accessible, and it's an opportunity for all students within that classroom to succeed. I'll pass it over to Kai now, who will talk a little bit more about the research behind the UDL framework, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. So extending on what has already been said, now looking at what evidence says in regards to linking UDL to diverse learner needs. UDL provides a proactive approach to inclusion that removes barriers before they limit participation. Our students are quite diverse, so like Josh spoke about, rather than giving out individual adjustments after a problem emerges, UDL prompts teachers to design lessons from the get-go. So this design mindset directly addresses systemic barriers that often disengage students from lower SES backgrounds or those with disabilities, and it prevents advanced learners from disengaging due to lack of challenge. UDL also aligns with the multi-tiered systems of support at Tier 1, which focus on universal class-wide practices that benefit all students. By offering all three UDL principles, the class teacher can simultaneously present content in ways that support visual or auditory access for the student with a hearing impairment, could provide scaffolded writing supports for those with dysgraphia or dyslexia, build in student choice and movement breaks to help sustain attention for the student with ADHD, and include enrichment pathways to extend the advanced learners. What this means is students receive the right level of support without needing to be singled out, creating classroom culture of equity and belonging, and for schools striving to meet legislative obligations under the Disability Standards for Education and the Australian Professional Teaching Standards. UDL at Tier 1 represents an evidence-informed, right-based approach that promotes both participation and improved academic achievement. When embedding UDL guidelines into things like mathematics, instructions improved both conceptual understanding and participation for students with learning difficulties compared to traditional instruction. Classrooms using UDL strategies such as flexible representation and student choice saw measurable gains in academic performance and self-efficacy across students with dyslexia, ADHD, and those working above year level expectations. UDL also assists in improvements to students' motivation and persistence. When tasks offer meaningful choice and multiple modes of expression, students show higher on-task behavior and greater willingness to attempt the challenging work. Evidence further highlights positive effects on classroom climate and peer acceptance. By embedding support universally rather than as individual add-ons, UDL reduces stigma and fosters equitable participation, a key condition for social skills progress in students with ASD and hearing impairment. Studies also show that when advanced learners are offered inquiry-based extension within a UDL framework, they demonstrate deeper conceptual learning without increasing achievement gaps. And UDL principles help break down barriers to text comprehension by providing multiple means of representation and engagement, supporting readers with learning difficulties through assisting to organize narrative elements, make inferences, and retain key details, reducing the cognitive load of decoding and meaning making, allowing learners to focus on higher order comprehension skills. And lastly, the UDL can also foster collaborative experiences with classmates through strategies such as getting them to work with new classmates, sharing shared digital workspaces, and role differentiated tasks, ensuring students with diverse strengths and needs can contribute equally and equitably to group goals. By embedding these practices at Tier 1, educators create a classroom culture where peer collaboration supports academic growth and social emotional development. And now Ethan can take it away for you.
Yeah, awesome, Kai. So why evaluate UDL? So evaluating UDL in the classroom is essential to ensuring that the inclusive pedagogies translate into academic success in the classroom for all students. In many classrooms, students differ in their physical, social, intellectual characteristics, as well as in their gender, language, religion, culture, race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and disability. And this means that educators must be sure that their strategies are not only equitable, but also effective. So, without evaluation, there is a risk of assuming that all students are benefiting equally from the content being taught, which can then overlook hidden barriers and create missed opportunities for support. So, how to evaluate UDL? Evaluating the effectiveness of UDL can be completed through a variety of different methods with a focus on both qualitative and quantitative data. Comparing assessment results before and after the implementation of UDL can be an effective tool to analyze its impact in the classroom to help identify trends in academic achievement, student engagement, and also task completion. So, observation of effectiveness. Observing the impact of UDL in the classroom has been identified as an effective strategy to to evaluate its benefits in the class. A study completed by Basham et al. In 2020 discusses that the UDL Observation Measurement Tool, or UDL OMT, to assess its impact on students in the classroom. The study shows that the UDL OMT has excellent internal consistency and can characterize differences in UDL implementation across a continuum of settings within a classroom and its diverse learners. While the study has highlighted its effectiveness, reliability can be brought into question as UDL OMT is based on the nature and context of classroom instructional factors, as well as observers' UDL knowledge influence interpretations of their observations. The peer feedback effectiveness. So, peer feedback of UDL in the classroom is also recognized as a strategy to assess the effectiveness for students. In a study conducted by Craig et al. In 2019, teachers that have attended professional development sessions about UDL and how it can be implemented in the classroom have a much higher recorded success of inclusive teaching, supporting the diverse learners. In addition to professional development, peer observation plays a crucial role in evaluating UDL. When colleagues observe a teacher's classroom practice, they can provide constructive feedback on how UDL principles are being applied, and this collaborative approach allows for a deeper understanding of teaching strategies and their impact on student engagement and learning. The peer feedback can help identify areas of strength and opportunities for improvement, fostering a culture of shared growth and professional dialogue, as discussed by Pachan and Shun 2015. Student feedback effectiveness. So, student voice is also an essential component of evaluating the effectiveness of UDL in the classroom. In a study conducted by Zhang et al. In 2022, student feedback, when used correctly, can provide valuable insight to the effectiveness of teaching strategies. Tools like exit tickets and surveys allow for student voice to discuss what worked well for them, what challenges they have faced, and their experiences within that learning. When implementing these in conjunction with UDL, it helps to assess if the strategy has been successful in the classroom. The aforementioned tools look into each student's personalized learning experience, seeing them as individuals. This can highlight where gaps in knowledge can be formed by students failing to take in content with the rest of the class, giving the opportunity for UDL to be implemented differently and more effectively. So, how do these support diverse learners? Observation, peer feedback, and student voice are key elements in supporting students with diverse learning needs and backgrounds. Observation gives the teacher the ability to watch student progress through tasks and engagement. This will help to guide the teacher to implement different avenues of UDL to develop better understanding of the content and create more opportunities for students to demonstrate their understanding. This allows for real-time adjustment to teaching based on individual barriers that diverse students may be facing, allowing for inclusivity regardless of any different factors that may affect the student's learning. Peer feedback between teachers supports inclusive practices of UDL for diverse learners in the classroom. By receiving this feedback, diverse learners can then receive unbiased learning opportunities through collaboratively refined teaching strategies, differentiated instruction, and consistent removal of barriers to learning. This helps to ensure that all students have equitable access to content and multiple opportunities to demonstrate their understanding. Student voice further creates inclusive educational opportunities through UDL. When students are encouraged to express their preferences, challenges, and ideas, teachers can better tailor instruction and to meet individuals' needs. This aligns with UDL's emphasis on learner agency and flexibility, creating more equitable and responsive learning environments. So this is how UDL links together to help support the diverse learners in a classroom and not only support their background, but also encourage and honor their history and their culture. Thank you very much for listening, and these are our references.